Welcome, everybody, to the ICTM Dialogue towards the International Council for Traditions of Music and Dance. At this dialogue session, members of the Executive Board of ICTM will be recommending a change for the name of the Council to the International Council for Traditions of Music and Dance, ICTMD. The recommendations are based on extensive consultation with council members around the world. We would also like to inform the participants of the General Assembly of voting procedures regarding this recommended change, as they will be held at the 47th World Conference, Legon, Ghana, in July 2023. We will record this session so that those who cannot attend can also have access to the dialogue here. Marcia and I will serve as co-chairs for this session. We will start with short presentations by our five speakers: Svanibor Pettan, Catherine Foley, Daniel Avorgbedor, Silvia, Citro, and Don Niles. We will then open the session for a short Q&A after the speakers have spoken. Marcia, can you now introduce Svanibor?
It is my pleasure to introduce the Council's current president, Svanibor Pettan. In 2023, Svanibor celebrates 4 decades of his ICTM membership, which began in his student years. Through these decades, he has served the Council in a wide variety of roles, including 6 years as Secretary General and now as President. Svanibor is professor and chair in ethnomusicology at the University of Ljubljana in Slovenia, with adjunct posts at universities in Colombo, Maribor, and Vienna. Among his most recent publications is the volume celebrating the International Council for Traditional Music, reflections of the first 7 decades, which he co-edited with Niles and Don Niles. Today, Svanibor will provide a brief historical overview of the name of the Council, discuss some experiences with name changes of sister societies and our study groups, and limitations with names. He will also share the Executive Board's arguments in favor of the proposed change. And just before I open the floor to Svanibor, I ask people to please check that their microphones are on mute so that there's no distraction from the sound. And that we can all hear what Svanibor is saying to us. Please, Svanibor.
Thank you very much for these nice introductions to both our inspiring co-hosts, Sooi Beng and Marcia Ostashewski. So, respected colleagues and dear friends, members of the International Council for Traditional Music. Item 7.2a in the ICTM statutes states the following: the Executive Board governs the Council and is responsible to the membership. Fully aware of this, the Board unanimously agreed to address the membership in this format, in the format of an ICTM dialogue session, and this is why we are together today. So, kindest thanks to each of you and also to all of you for taking this hour and a half for the benefit of our favorite scholarly community. Let me briefly remind you on the past events. At our latest General Assembly of Members in July 2021, online voting of the total of 222 votes, resulting in the International Council for Traditional Music and Dance, so it means just adding the dance, received like 53% of the votes. International Council for Music and Dance Traditions, so which involves the change of the acronym, received like 34%. International Council for Traditional Music, which is our current name, received 12%, and there was abstain, yeah? So since neither of the proposed new names received the required 2/3 of the votes, the name of the council remained unchanged. Despite the clearly expressed wish of the majority of the voters for the change that would include dance in the council's name. So the board discussed this case, and on 12 August 2021, on behalf of the board, I provided a membership via ICTML with the following message. So I would like to read it just to remind you on this. So I said, dear colleagues, respected ICTM members, aware of the discontent of some members with the voting procedure and or result, at its first meeting following the General Assembly, the Executive Board established the Executive Board Committee on the name of the Council, chaired by Catherine Foley. So we reacted immediately, actually, to the results. Yeah, the aim of this committee was to address the name issue in a focused, inclusive, and efficient manner. So please make sure to address your comments to the committee. That was our call at the time. The board's duty was and still is to follow the statutes, and the voting of the name was designed with this in mind. The council names presented for consideration reflected the preferences of the membership in the 2018 and 2020 surveys. And the result of the voting provided us with a helpful insight that most members feel positive about the presence of dance in the name of the council, and that we perhaps need more time to discuss implications of traditional versus traditions. These are certainly things that the committee considered in detail. You will hear more about this from Catherine. According to the statutes, the next opportunity to vote will be at the next General Assembly in 2023. It will be in Ghana this year. So the committee on the name of the council gratefully awaits proposals from all members of how to optimally design the vote and avoid potential shortcomings. It is not too early to start this constructive process today. With warm regards and best wishes on behalf of the Executive Board. So this was the message sent in August, on August 11, 2011. So, changing the name of the scholarly society is not a particularly common procedure, but it may happen. There is nothing wrong with it, and we shouldn't be afraid of doing it for a good reason and a lasting reason. It is a part of common knowledge that our organization, established in England in 1947 as IFMC, or International Folk Music Council, changed its name in South Korea in 1981 to ICTM, or the International Council for Traditional Music. This move was inspired by our Asian members. And I will provide you now with a quote from Eric Stockman, his text from 1988. He commented, terminological and ideological change from folk to traditional, I quote, worked like magic and opened up doors in regions where the word folk music had a somewhat pejorative ring, end of quote. Then I learned later from Timothy Rice about Nazir Jarazboy's suggestion. At that time, he was the member of the ICTM Executive Board. He suggested to keep the acronym IFMC just by changing the meaning of some of these words. So it would be International Forum for Music Cultures. Quite an interesting suggestion, but it didn't go through. So rather than this, the majority decided just to implement the traditional music, International Council for Traditional Music. According to our former president, Salvel Shawan Castelo Branco, Dieter Christensen, who was directly involved in the name change, later complained that he would rather prefer like music traditions rather than traditional music. So maybe this is one also of the reasons why we included this option last time, and then we wanted you to discuss also these implications. Anyway, now we have a good chance for that, and I would like to say that Executive Board agreed to support the committee on the name of the Council's proposal and advocates today the change from ICTM, from International Council for Traditional Music, to International Council for Traditions of Music and Dance. So I thank you for your attention to this introductory little presentation. And now I will give the word to Catherine, Don, Silvia, and Daniel. Yeah, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Svanibor. Catherine is our next speaker. Catherine Foley is a long-standing member of ICTM, serving as chair of ICTM Study Group on Ethnochoreology, chair of the organizing committee for the 27th Symposium of the ICTM Study Group on Ethnochoreology at the University of Limerick in 2012, and co-chair of the ICTM's 44th World Conference at the University of Limerick in 2017. Catherine is a member of ICTM's executive board from 2015 to 2023 and served as chair of the executive board's committee on the name of the council from 2021 to 2023. Catherine will speak of the work of the ICTM executive board's committee on the name of the council and the recommendation made by the committee to the executive board for a change of name of the council to the International Council for Traditions of Music and Dance. Catherine?
Thank you, Silvia. I hope you can all hear me, and it's a privilege to be here today. So with its post-Second World War roots and its formal consultative relations with UNESCO, the name ICTM has come to represent an important academic home for many of us, one that welcomes scholars from all over the world who endeavour to enrich understandings of humanity through music and dance. We have worn the name proudly as a professional identity marker. Some people might argue, why are we proposing a name change? And the answer to this is that the membership surveys by the ICTM in 2018 and 20 indicated that a name change would benefit the organisation. Also, the findings of the vote on the name change during the General Assembly in July 2021 illustrated beyond a doubt that a name change was desired by the majority of the membership voting. This desire of 87% of the membership voting voted that dance should be included in the name of the council. The vote also illustrated that there was not agreement between traditional and traditions in the name. Resulting from this election in 2021, the ICTM Executive Board established the Committee on the Name of the Council. The initial remit of the committee was to recommend to the Executive Board, 1, a potential name change for the Council, and 2, a potential change in the ICTM's voting system. In 2022, the Executive Board agreed that the latter, a potential change in the ICTM's voting system, was best placed within the Committee for Revision of the ICTM Statutes, Memoranda, Guidelines and Terminology. The members of the Committee on the Name of the Council agreed to this, allowing our committee to focus solely on the name of the Council. Today, I welcome this opportunity to share with you the work of our committee and the recommendations made by our committee to the Executive Board in December 2022. And that recommendation, as you have heard, is International Council for Traditions of Music and Dance. And now to the name of the council and our committee. The committee consisted of myself as chair, with Beatrice Herrera Carrado, Don Niles, Ormamala Sakar Munzi, Marcia Ostashewski, Maria Agatha Oza, Michael Santilia, and Kendra Steputat. Members from within the Executive Board and outside of it were represented on this committee, and these members represented different parts of the world and different stages within their academic careers. From September 2021 to December 2022, we met online for 6 meetings. As a committee, we were in agreement that the name of our organisation should ideally represent, as much as is possible, what we as scholars do and what differentiates us from other scholarly music and dance organisations. Our organisation has a relatively long history, approximately 76 years, and for purposes of identification and continuity, we agreed that care had to be given when a name change is considered. What in the existing name should remain and what should change? Since the establishment of our committee, participants discussed different issues relating to a potential name change, and we agreed that a process of engagement with the wider ICTM membership was important. To this end, we collated emails relating to the name of the council on the ICTM listservs, and these went back to 2015. We also collated documented materials in our ICTM bulletins, these again relating to changes in the name of the council, and particular reference to the bulletins in 1991, 2015, and the April bulletin in 2021. We also collected data from the 2021 election and examined the online chat commentary from it. In addition, we requested comments and feedback on the current name, the ICTM, from chairs of the ICTM study groups, and we received feedback from 8 of the study groups. All of this material we used to inform our decision. In July 2022, participants on our committee presented a roundtable session at the 46th World Conference in Lisbon. The title of our roundtable was, "What's All in a Name?" We presented arguments around our findings and the issues around a name change. These presentations looked at the history of the ICTM, particularly again around the name. As we know, it was established in 1947. Constitution was put in place in 1948, although it was International Folk Music Council at the beginning in 1948 became International Folk Music, and in parenthesis, Dance and Song. And later on, it was decided that it was too long, and to simplify it, it became International Folk Music Council. And those of you who's read the anniversary volume will realize that there was an International Folk Dance Council in 1935, again with Maud Carpiles, who had set this up and who was very instrumental in the setting up of the International Folk Music Council with the English Folk Dance and Song Society in 1947. So our arguments were looking at these histories. We also looked at the potential inclusion of dance now in the name of the council, and an examination of issues relating to the concepts of traditional and traditions. All of these arguments were gleaned from the data that we had at our disposals. We noted the inclusion of dance within the name of the organisation, albeit in parentheses in 1948, but that it was removed simply to the name IFMC. We argued with the existing name that existed, that there was a hierarchalization of knowledge fields, especially the taken for granted argument that dance is already included or subsumed under music. We argued that the addition of dance to the name of the council would acknowledge the parity of music and dance as knowledge-based systems, bearing in mind that in many cultures around the world, there is not a separate word for music and dance. We argued that at a glance at the names of our study groups, that there is an increasing number of them with music and dance or movement in their names. This indicated that there is an interest in the study, not just of music, but of the body, dance, structured movement systems, and embodied knowledge in diverse cultures. And we argue that studies in these can potentially enrich scholarship about diverse traditions and practices, including music. We also agreed that the addition of dance to the name would support the visibility of the field of dance and the career prospects of young dance scholars within our organisation, particularly with regards to promotion in academic institutions and success with funding applications, particularly for participation in our ICTM symposia and conferences. Related to the terms traditional and traditions at our roundtable, we noted that following the election in July 2021, that there was disagreement between the terms traditional and traditions. and the committee presented data and arguments from feedback collated around these concepts at our roundtable. So during our roundtable presentation, we received valuable feedback from those present, which contributed to further discussion and finally to an agreement. 1, our organisation should include dance in its name. And 2, that within an increasingly fragmented world, the ICTM is in a strong position to advocate for equality, inclusivity, and respect for diversity. Hence, we agreed that traditions, as opposed to the more exclusive term traditional, was preferable at this point in time in the history of our organisation. Also, since many scholars within the ICTM work across a wide range of music and dance genre, we considered the word traditions to be again more inclusive and representative of these scholars and their research, and that the word traditions in the name of our organisation might encourage other music scholars to join our organisation. In addition to this, our committee discussed the placing of the word traditions in the name. We agreed that by placing the word traditions before music and dance, it would provide a continuity and a link with the existing name and its acronym, ICTMD. In December 2022, the committee recommended the name International Council for Traditions of Music and Dance to the Executive Board. The recommended name was approved by the Executive Board, but it will be up to you, the membership, in July in Ghana at our World Conference there, if there will or will not be a change of name. And I'd like at this stage to thank the members of the committee. I've named them already, but I'd like to thank them for their commitment, engagement, time, and the great care that they took in contributing to discussions and finally reaching an agreement on the recommended name. So thank you to the committee, thank you to the Executive Board, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Catherine. Moving along, I'd like to introduce Daniel Kodzo Avorgbedor. His first direct experience with ICTM took place when, as a graduate student, he presented a paper at the 1983 meeting in New York City. Since then, he has significantly increased his network of scholarly exchanges and research collaboration, and these experiences and opportunities were further enriched through engagements with ICTM, such as hosting the 2018 Africa Music Study Group meeting in Ghana, serving as reviewer for the yearbook, vice chair for the study group on sacred and spiritual sounds and practices, and as member of the Africa Outreach Group and other activities. Pardon me. His service opportunities and scholarly exchanges have greatly enriched not only his personal professional profile, he says, they have also redefined in very positive ways his sense of belonging in the entirety of humanity, even in the face of precarities in a fast-changing world. Today, he's going to speak from an autobiographical perspective about his Indigenous and local cultural background and subsequent international scholarly profile and the impact of this on his critical understanding and appreciation of initiatives towards broader conceptions and research associated with ICTM, some problems he has observed, institutional bifurcations, closed disciplinary, and their challenges to coherent, meaningful pedagogical and research practices, drawing particularly on lessons from African experiences, and some considerations of ICTM and ways in which the name change could enable an expansion of and an enrichment of current decolonial projects. Daniel.
Thank you, Marcia, for the introduction. Can you all hear me well? Hello?
Yes, we can.
We can hear you well.
Great. Once upon a time at Indiana University, Bloomington, there was archives of folk and primitive music. today, we have archives of traditional music. Before Bloomington, I received my undergraduate training in music at the University of Ghana under the visionary tutelage and leadership of the late Kwabena Nketia. During his time, students from dance, music, and theater must all take some common or prescribed courses. I took a course in dance and theater students took courses in elementary music theory. And we all together took a course in choral repertoire. Indeed, these early moments constituted a significant grounding and beginning, not only in experiencing the interrelatedness of the arts and cultural traditions in the classroom or in the post-colonial institutions, but they also reinforced and justified those close interrelationships that were part of my socially prescribed participation in music and dance traditions of the Ewe people, and in fact of other Ghanaian and African cultures. I can thus confidently foreground my autobiographical constitution in the lived experience closely imbricated in the affective, pedagogical, and even diagnostic resources associated with the classroom and indigenous settings in which the rationale, efficacies, and ultimately the transformative qualities of that interrelatedness. I dare say that interrelatedness represents a sacred grove and trove of primordial, pre-modern, and postmodern existentialities that explain our reason for living and being in the world. In justifying the need for a change and thus to become more inclusive, I relate my position and experiences further. Talking of lived experience, a constant condition and consequence of the eternal braid or interrelatedness of the music, the kinesthetic and visualities, and the attributes of multisensoriality is situated in time and place. Just last week, my German colleague, Mark Koester, sort of confronted me when I shared the news of the 2023 ICTM in Ghana. He quickly said, and I quote, "Well, ICTM has a long way to go. They don't pay attention to popular music." Unquote. Well, I nicely reminded him of our current task, the work in progress, the change of name, to reflect what we believe, practice, even as we are limited by vocabularies. And I asked myself this question: am I still an advocate for that change? Yes, I'm a strong advocate for the change, to be more inclusive, that is, International Council for Traditions of Music and Dance. At the very beginning of my conversation on the need to change the name, I have always had in mind and suggested the plural, traditions. I take this opportunity to reaffirm that stance, and which I have already done directly and indirectly in my opening statements. We live in times where it is easy to perform that which is politically correct. However, I propose that our current efforts should be understood and appreciated beyond such myopic lens. Singularities and institutional bifurcations can be severely alienating. We need to consider and articulate more inclusivities and pluralities beyond Deleuzian quantitative and qualitative multiplicities. And we also need to keep a dialogue with those other research constituencies or perspectives that advocate pluralities, especially as summed up in contemporary employment of terms such as heritages instead of the singular heritage, identities instead of identity, and so on. In this way, we will continue to suggest new horizons of thought and action, and also absorb and integrate those emanating from outside of our discipline. And when I say discipline, there's always the big question mark for that. So in brief, all I'm saying, I'm a strong supporter and advocate for the change of name, and that is International Council for Traditions of Music and Dance. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Up next is Silvia Citro. Silvia is an ordinary member of the ICTM Executive Board, chair of the Outreach Committee with Latin America and the Caribbean, and chair of the Translations Committee of the EB. She will share some of the main reasons to support the inclusion of dance along with music in the name of our council from the point of view of regional cultural expressions and academic studies of Latin America and the Caribbean. In this way, she tries to extend the intercultural dialogues towards a slightly more decolonial horizon. Over to you, Silvia.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night for the different people. Here I share some slides. Here. Okay. 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 Is possible to see the slide? Yes.
Yes, we see it.
Okay, thank you. Well, as this is a kind of bilingual presentation for some in English and Spanish, I want to share some of the main reasons to support the inclusion of dance along with music in the name of our council from some Latin American and Caribbean perspective. I will take into account three topics: local cultural traditions and later academic studies in these regions, and finally some geopolitical and gender questions. And in this way, we try to extend intercultural dialogues towards a slightly more decolonial horizon. We will see some pictures from our researchers in Latin America. In relation to cultural traditions, sorry, I have here. A large part of the ethnic, folkloric, and popular music of our region is music for dancing, or music that is performed together with different symbolic, ritual, and body gestures. This can be appreciated in our indigenous people, Afro-Latin American groups, as well as in the hybrid or mestizo practices that emerged from our colonial history. For instance, from the Caribbean salsa to the Argentine, Uruguayan tango, to give just two of the best-known examples of the 6,500 kilometers of music and dance between Cuba and Argentina, for example. Another example, perhaps less well-known, are the music and dances that are combined in the celebrations of popular and mestizo Catholicism in the region, which express the resistance and the resilience of different groups. This is a photo of the so-called devils of the Corpus Christi, body of Christ, which you can see on the interesting website of the liaison officers in Venezuela, Catherine Lenguinat, and her group. Finally, it is important to remember that in many indigenous languages of Latin America, there are no general words to music and dance, but there are particular terms that refers to each of the genres that combine both expressions. That is the case of the Numi, this photograph, a simultaneous song dance of the Tobacom of the Argentine Chaco that we analyzed with my colleague Sarletti and published in the Yearbook of Traditional Music in 2009. Consequently, in many of these groups, the split between music and dance and even other arts can be considered as one of the corollaries of the complex process of modernity coloniality, a process that, however, we can try to subvert. Well, scholar studies in America Latina and Caribbean. I would like to mention very briefly that already in the first folklore studies in the 1940s and later in the musicological studies in 1960, some Latin American authors describe and analyze music and dance in a related way. Some examples are Carlos Vega in the 40s and Irma Ruiz in the 60s in Argentina, Julia Elena Fortune in Bolivia, Isabel Aretz in Venezuela, Paulo de Carvalho Neto in Brazil, Paraguay, and Ecuador, José María Arguedas, Fernando Romero, José Durán in Peru, María Stargreve in Chile. These authors were involved in state cultural policies that, through the constitution of music and dance repertoire, contribute to building national identity imaginaries in relation to indigenous, Afro-Latin American and Caribbean and European influences. Thus, some traditions were more visible and legitimate than others, while others were dismissed. This is a conflicted process in our country, but a lot of these authors pay attention to the both expression, music and in recent decades, we can see a new generation of researchers more influenced by methodological approach that promote the joint treatment of music and dance, as well as other aesthetic expression, such is the case the performance studies and the aforementioned decolonial term. I belong to research groups in Argentina and in Latin America that we work from these methodological approaches. Well, for finish some political and scholar issues. I would like to highlight that the name change would allow the inclusion of more researchers from Latin America and Caribbean who have specialized in dance and who today do not feel fully represented by the current name of our organization. Likewise, I will add that many of these researchers are women who have tended to be made invisible in the musicological fields of our countries, in which men have maintained some hegemonic position. So I think that the change name could be an opportunity to more people and more scholar women to include in our organization. Okay, very briefly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Silvia. How wonderful to have the translation and also to hear about or bring to the fore issues, many aspects of intersectionality. So thank you for that. And our final speaker is Don Niles. He is the Assistant Director of the Music Division of the Institute of Papua New Guinea Studies. Don researches all types of music in Papua New Guinea. He's currently one of the 2 vice presidents of ICTM, a member of the Executive Board Committee on the name of the Council, and many other board committees. Don has been a member of the ICTM Executive Board since 2007, and he will be completing his involvement on the board this year. And we'll all miss him. He's been a wonderful mentor and teacher. Like other senior ICTM board members, Don has been an exemplary mentor to those of us who are newer. Don has also served as general editor of the Yearbook for Traditional Music, and he is co-editor with Svanibor Pettan and Niles Cerebasic of the book celebrating the International Council for Traditional Music. It was published last year. We celebrated that in Lisbon at the ICTM meeting there. In today's session, Don will summarize the voting procedure that will be followed at the General Assembly in Ghana when members will vote on changing the name of the council. Don.
Thank you very much, Marcia. Greetings from Papua New Guinea. I also am honored to speak to you today and thank all of you for joining us. As you have heard, the previous General Assembly in after the previous General Assembly in 2021, the Executive Board established a committee to consider the name of the council and the method for changing the statutes. In the interests of transparency, that committee decided to focus only on the name, while giving responsibility for considering the numbers required to change the statutes to the Executive Board Committee on the Revision of the ICTM statutes, memoranda, guidelines, and terminology. In particular, this latter committee was to consider whether the present requirement that a 2/3 majority of those voting at the General Assembly be maintained for any changes to the statutes, as stated in Statute 12C, or if some other majority would be preferable. I should also note that the rule requiring a 2/3 majority was not new to the statutes when they were presented in 2017. Rather, a 2/3 majority has been part of our council's bylaws since 1957. That committee was aware that any potential changes to the statutes would have to be voted on at the 2023 General Assembly and hence could not take effect until the following General Assembly in 2025 at the earliest. After much discussion, the committee decided not to recommend any changes to the requirements for altering the statutes. That is, a 2/3 majority must still be obtained at the General Assembly for any changes to be made to the statutes, including a change of name as being discussed today. The committee strongly felt that any change to the statutes is very serious business and should require very significant support from the membership. Hence, a 2/3 majority remains appropriate. Voting will take place during the 46th ordinary meeting of the General Assembly of Members, which will be held at the 47th World Conference in Legon, Ghana on Saturday, the 15th of July this year at 2:30 in the afternoon. Voting will be available to all ICTM members in good standing, wherever you are, irrespective of whether you have registered for the conference or not. Your membership must be up to date and you must attend the General Assembly. All current ICM members who attend the General Assembly, either in person or online, will be able to vote, and you will do it in exactly the same way. Everyone will vote using Zoom's poll feature, as was done at the previous General Assembly in 2021. Whether you are in the auditorium in Legon or overseas, you will open the Zoom link on your mobile, tablet, or computer and vote electronically. If you are at the conference and don't have such a device, there will be paper ballots available. Once the Zoom vote is over, the results from any paper ballots will be added, and the ICTM president, as chair of the General Assembly, will announce the results. The Secretariat feels that this method of voting will best uphold ICTM's ideals for transparency and equality by giving all eligible voters the opportunity to vote in a straightforward, simple way that worked well 2 years ago. Please do take advantage of this opportunity to vote on this important matter. Of course, information on voting will be communicated to members repeatedly in advance of the vote on the 15th of July. But do keep in mind that even if a 2/3 majority of those at the General Assembly does vote for a change of name, that change of name does not take place immediately. Rather, the results must be submitted in an electronic ballot to the membership as a whole for ratification. This ballot will take place within 6 months of the General Assembly meeting. For ratification, a simple majority, not a 2/3 majority, is required. If the change is ratified, then it becomes effective immediately. While a vote on changing the name of the council is a very special event indeed, please note that all of these procedural details have not been created anew just for this occasion. Rather, we are simply following what is presented in the statutes. I look forward to seeing you all at the General Assembly in July. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Don. Thank you very much to all of our speakers and to all of you for your kind attention to our speakers. And I would like to acknowledge especially the many colleagues that I see from Turkey and areas affected by the recent earthquake. So glad to see you and that you are safe and able to join us today. I've been asked now to moderate a period of discussion. So I invite your questions and comments. And I kindly ask that you please raise your Zoom hand signal because I'm going to try to keep a speakers list. I'll call upon everyone by name to open their mic, one person at a time, and then please close your mic. I'll do my very best to watch for the order in which hands are raised and to support a productive dialogue. Thank you. Questions, comments? Okay, so I think it was Nur or Egil and Ulrich in that order. Nur, Egil, and Ulrich.
Okay. Sorry.
Please be brief, but do offer your questions or comments. I think maybe Nur is not hearing me. Egil, please, I welcome you.
Thank you. I think, thank you for a very interesting and good orientation. Still, the only relevant question from the people who want to change is, will it be a vote where you get the chance to say, we want to change the name? And if there is a 3/4 majority, then it will be a question about which change of name will take place. Will it be this alternative or that alternative? The problem last time was that it was done in a different way, which to my understanding was not correct. Sorry for that, but.
Thank you. Don, would you like to explain again briefly how it will go?
Right. Well, thank you, Egil. And as I explained, the voting will just be between two choices: the new name, as has been presented today, or retaining the old name. That's it. So just two choices: either change or stay with the present name. So any of the issues about numbers and so forth that some people felt occurred last time will not be an issue at all this time, because it's an either or vote. One name, a new name, or retain the present name. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's clarified things, Egil. That's good. Thank you. Ulrich, please.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Well, I have to say I was a bit surprised by the last briefing. First of the name I never heard before, International Council for Music and Dance Traditions, and about the discussions which should have been take place. I haven't heard about this discussion of this very name, and I'm not sure the chairs of the study groups were included. For me, the problem is I have no problems with adding dance after a short discussions with a colleague from the ethnochoreology study group. But when folk music was changed to traditional music, this was a change from one established term and concept to another established term and concept. The change of the proposed name, we are invited to. This was a bit strange formulation, very biased. In the bulletin of 22, we were informed that we have the opportunity to vote about a new name, and now we only were informed we are in the position to change the name, that we are in the position to remain the old name, we are not directly informed. We know it, of course, but it is a bit biased. So changing to traditions of music and dance, that means to change a concept to a something which is not a concept. There's a whole book by Joseph Williams about the concept of traditional music. There's an article by myself. I have never heard about any article about the concept of music and dance traditions. It is just something, just some words. And I'm afraid such a change would cause huge confusions in the world of music and in the world of scholarships. It would be very hard to understand, to explain such a change. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Catherine, I'm wondering if you might very briefly review, just in an outline form, again, when the process of engagement and information and networking regarding the name of the council.
Yeah, of course. Well, it was based on, first of all, I'm sorry to hear if somebody's dissatisfied with it. But as you can understand, it's very hard to please everybody, you know, and everybody will have their own preference. But it was trying to collate what we could collate, taking into account all the listservs, the commentary on the listservs, inviting chairs of all the study groups to get back to us on it, looking at arguments that have been put forward in the bulletins, also looking at the anniversary volume, you know, and the chapters that were written within that. These along with ourselves, you know, the committee ourselves discussing it, we went for traditions because, as I said, I suppose looking at the inclusivity, the plurality of voices, that's what we felt was more appropriate at this point in time going forward, to include popular musics and dances, to include contemporary music and dance, you know, and also, I suppose it's the openness, the inclusivity and plurality. That's why we went with traditions, which is a valid term.
May I?
I think a brief follow-up is okay, and then we'll move on to the next speaker, please.
Well, plurality is one thing, inclusivity is another thing. There's no definition without exclusivity. Any definition is exclusive. And well, I discussed this in my article. Just, I'm wondering why, obviously, nobody of the organizers were interested in the pro and contra discussion today.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your last sentence.
We were not in, there was no, why there was not an idea today to initiate a pro and contra discussion, but only invite speakers with a neutral or a pro position.
That's a fair question, Ulrich. Thank you. Yes, I think Catherine can speak a little more to briefly, if you might, Catherine. Just, I know that, for example, the session that took place in Lisbon might be of interest.
Yes, well, we could have done that, Ulrich, but at the time we felt this was the best way to go about it, in the sense that, you know, many of us in the committee were, you know, some of us, like me, I suppose, as you know, Ulrich, I have been involved in traditional music and dance for most of my life in Ireland, but equally having taught ethnochoreology for a quarter of a century, many of the people that came to do research weren't just researching traditional dance. They were researching many other forms of human movement. And for me, I felt the ICTM, and this is very personal, for me in the ICTM, if they weren't looking at traditional dance, they didn't feel it was a home for them. And that is just mine. But from the point of view of today, we thought this was a good way to go about it, allowing for discussion like this afterwards. And I'm really thankful that you are participating in the discussion, because this is why we want the discussion, to hear your voice, Ulrich, and others besides. This is why we just presented at the beginning but this discussion is so important to today's event.
Thank you. Thank you both. I think we need to carry on, if I may. There may be some more time to continue different threads of discussion, but I'd like to hear from more speakers, if I may. Salwa, and then I'll speak to what Ali has shared in the chat.
Hello, everyone. I would like to commend the board for this approach. This question has been around for a very long time. When I was president, we made an effort to advance, but we didn't go as far as you did. So first of all, the committee, the board, and to bring us to this point. My personal opinion is, of course, in favor, because for many years as teaching ethnomusicology and music research more broadly, I was faced with many people saying, well, but I don't really study traditional music. And I think the term music traditions is music, traditions of music and dance is much more inclusive and will allow for many more scholars and people interested in studying music and dance to join us. And of course, dance should have been in many years ago. So I hope that this vote will go in this direction, which I totally support, and I just want to thank you all for bringing us to this point.
Thank you so much, Salwa. Mohammed, I see your hand, but I'd first like to read a couple of comments that came in the chat section. In particular, Ali said, I'm not able to open my mic, but if I may, I was wondering what other consequences of changing the name. If the name is changed, what sort of effect would this proposed name change create? And I don't know if perhaps Svanibor, you might like to speak even briefly to that. I mean, of course, one of the things we were concerned about on the name of the council committee was the acronym. A lot of people are really quite tied to that. But Svanibor, and I don't know if you might have something to say to Ali's comment.
Thank you, Marcia. I would just, if you allow me, just go a little bit back to Ulrich's question, because this information about this name has been sent also to the study group chairs, as Catherine pointed out in her presentation. So it was around. This is not the first time that we are presenting actually this. But in any way, I think this is an opportunity, of course, to discuss pros and cons, just to help you make up your mind. And then when the time comes in Ghana, so everybody will know how to act, how to vote. The point of view from the executive board is very much in favor of this name. And I also want to now, for all these reasons, also that Salva now very nicely added her comments to this. Yes, so there are many good reasons to go for this change. But of course, we will always accept that there are other voices, there are other opinions, and we are democratic and plural society, so I don't see any problem here. The other thing, of course, there will be certain formal acts to be done coming out from the results of these elections, if they go into this with the new name. But this is all manageable. And I think Elsie Dunning spoke in the past about how important it is to keep the acronym the same or at least similar, related. Because after the change from IFMC to ICTM, some people just ask, so is it the same society? What is this? You know, do we have another society? Now, in keeping this acronym just by adding D and by making this important change in the middle, I think really we are making a few steps forward. And I see it really as a new horizon for our society. The traditions as such, which are still important in many parts of the world, are still there. So we are not losing anybody because of that, but we open the doors actually for gaining new members, for raising like a broader interest. So I think this is what I would add at this moment.
Thank you, Svanibor. And also, I just noticed a follow-up comment from Ulrich, but of course, Ulrich, the new name was one that was proposed by members and one that was given consideration. I'd like to turn now to Mohammed, if I can do so. But before I ask you to open your mic, Mohammed, I just want to point out that Egil has followed up with a comment noting about, some concern about voting. So we'll make sure that we take that into consideration as we move forward and make sure that things are really clear for people. Mohammed, please. Your mic isn't open, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good. There we go.
Okay. All of you, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be upon you all. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, all of you. I'm so happy to join this meeting, and really the change of things and science and research is developed from time to time. The suggestion of the name to add D after ICTM, I think there is some reasons to do that because of I have some examples here in Sudan. We first have a Center of Folklore Studies. This folklore studies joined music and dance and many things about folklore. After 2 decades, they changed it to Center of Sudanese Cultural Studies. Okay, this means, or that means, we are going to progress or develop our researches, and then the letter D or dance. I think most of our cultures, we studied music through dance, music and rhythms and dance all together. Here in Africa or in Latin America, we didn't find music, traditional music, separated from dance. So I think I agree with this suggestion to add dance and traditions of music and dance. I think it is very common or very wide. We can put it on the coming forum or coming conference to vote on it. But I agree with the idea itself. And thank you so much.
Thank you. And thanks, Ulrich, for your comment in the chat. Folks will follow up and read as they wish. Thank you very much. Now, Noor's hand keeps coming up and going down and coming up and going down. So I wonder if
I'm very sorry about that, Marcia. Yes,
okay.
I kept having a problem with the with pressing the mute and unmute.
Okay.
Do you hear me now?
Yes, please share your comment or your question.
Actually, my question was, so in case the majority of votes were there on changing the name, there will be then another 6 months for the ratification. So that means that the change might take place in January 2024. Am I correct?
Don?
Well, it's thank you for your question.
Yeah.
Yes, it'll be up to the Secretariat. They have, according to the statute, 6 months in order to request ratification from the membership at large. But from past experience, and because it's an electronic vote, this can happen quite quickly. But as you say, it may not happen until next year, but it's much more likely it will happen this year. I mean, I guess unless either Carlos or Tongsun want to comment on this, but I don't particularly see that this should present any problems in doing the ratification process. So it took place quite quickly previously when various aspects of the statutes had to be ratified. So I don't think there should be any other problem this time around as well. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Carlos, Tongsun, did you wish to add anything, or shall we move to Susanna?
No, I think Don has summarized everything without a problem. Yeah.
Thank you. Susanna.
Hi, everybody. I'm very happy to see this discussion going on here. And I just want to add something that, of course, I agree to change the name. And I also agree that every time we try to classify something, we have problems because we are excluding or including or proposing something that everything is included. So we don't have the focus. This is just my concern is, of course, according to our point of view from Europe, for example, the concept of traditions includes everything. Tradition or traditions includes everything. Probably, and the concept has been so much discussed amongst anthropology, sociology, and many, different disciplines, that now traditions is everything. And remember Hobsbawm, no? So everything is a tradition. So in this sense, my only concern is what differentiates us from the Society for Musicology or the YASM, for example, or the other organizations. Of course, I agree. I just want to add this, just to think a little bit, if the change of the name in this way will exactly differentiate us from other organizations.
Thank you, Susanna. My question. Thank you. I'm going to ask.
Of course, sorry, Marcia. I think adding dance is, of course, I think is consensual for all of us. Nobody is inquiring the adding of dance. But the rest, I don't know if it is. It's better than having traditional music. For me, according to me, it's much better. And but I just think if we are not losing our focus, okay.
Thank you, Susanna. And Egil has affirms what you were saying. But I'm wondering, Catherine, I know that there were quite a number of discussions. Is there something you'd like to summarize or offer in response to Catherine's comment?
Yeah, I can understand, Susanna, why you are what you're saying. But I think for us within the ICTM and the history that we have within the organization, I think it's a perspective that we bring to the organization that is important. And I think that we will continue to do that. But I can understand that you may say it's a lack of focus, because it is opening it up to different sorts of music and dance, and trying to be cognizant, I suppose, of the name changes of the past and trying to keep the continuity with the past going forward. It was kind of the best we could do.
Yes, I understand. Can I say something?
Of course.
Yes, of course, I understand. I know that our big difference when we compare to other organizations is the approach, is the way as we work, is the way as we include. Yeah. But how can we put this in a name?
This certainly was a challenge, I'll say, as a member of the committee, if I may, that, many of the names suggested by many members that had actually quite a bit of support didn't even include anything as traditions or traditional at all. So, it's we were looking to work with ways that were, much more inclusive, but also connecting with a history and an established practice. Does that about sound right, Catherine?
Yeah.
Thank you, Susanna. And I'm not seeing any other hands up. Did anyone else wish to speak, offer a question or a comment? Anyone else from the name of the council? Oh, committee. Okay. Choshanbe. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. If you would correct me, please.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks for this wonderful discussion. I'm really sorry, my internet connection is not good, so I won't be able to open my video. I mean, it's a really interesting kind of, discussion about how to include this dance tradition or traditional dance in this particular name of the organization. But my concern is with the word traditions of music. Sounds to me a little bit of like deviation from the word traditional. That is I'm thinking that when we talk about traditions of music, means that we are going to kind of, be inclusive also, like starting the pop music. Particularly, for example, in Tajikistan, we call it estrada, which is the introduction of the Soviet time kind of, or any other music that is particularly not in a way traditional, but sort of has their own traditions. So maybe just a little bit of elaboration on that would be great. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Catherine?
I missed part of that question, sorry.
More to traditions or traditional. I think that was really your question, wasn't it, Chorshanba?
Yes, it is like traditions of music. When we talk about traditions, then our focus is somehow is on the traditions itself rather than on music. But rather than so that was my question. So what does it include actually when we talk about, because now ICTM is, the focus is more about the music, traditional music, which involves all these aspects of traditions that are related to it. And so my question is, like, when we talk about traditions of music, then the focus is basically sort of, more on the traditions itself rather than on the concept of, how it is being used in sort of, so that the inclusiveness would be like any genre of music that have their own traditions would be included.
Yes, that's true. That is the way it is interpreted. Yes, it is inclusive. Yes, it would include popular musics or theatrical musics or theatrical dance, popular dance, rap, hip hop, all of this. Yes, it would be inclusive of all of those, including, of course, what's regarded in cultures as traditional. There are a lot of us have been doing it, would also be inclusive of that. It's not going away from traditional music and dance. Traditional music and dance is also there, it has always been there. It will continue to be there, but it's just being more welcoming and embracing other musics and dances within it, because I think we could learn. We could learn from other people who study other musics and other dances. And because there's so much collaboration going on today with, let's say, traditional music and traditional dance, contemporary dance, it's good to be able to investigate those collaborations as well and different kinds of connections, opening up dialogues, and I think we can learn from that in our organization.
Thank you, Catherine. I keep calling on you, but that's because you are the chair of that committee. I know there were so many different perspectives. We had long discussions amongst us as a group. And then, of course, in the dialogues meetings and in the sessions that we held in conferences. So thank you for bringing the summary of these discussions to share with us today. Noor has asked a follow-up question, asked if she can, and we do have a little bit of time yet. So Noor, would you like to open for the second question?
Yes, sure. I actually wrote my question here. Just let me read it, please. Yeah. Will dance be only the dance connected with some traditions which combine music and dance, like, for example, tango? Tango is a dance and is a music. Actually, originally it's a dance in the first place, in my opinion. Or all dance traditions, regardless of its connectivity to music? That's my question.
Yes, I don't know, Catherine, if you'd like to speak.
Yeah, it would. It would. Because you have music and dance, it doesn't mean that to look at dance, you need to be a musician. To look at music, you need to be a dancer. Of course, you can be. But you can look at dance on its own. You can look at music on its own. You can look at the connections between the music and the dance. So it's like for dance scholars, for music scholars, dance scholars, ethnochoreologists who have specialized in the body, in movement studies, in embodied values within the movement, looking at the body in space and time. So it could look at, deaf communities who dance, deaf communities who move, who will not be talking about maybe the connection with music. So yes, it would be open up to dance with a capital D, open up to music with a capital M, and look at different cultures, traditions, and practices within that.
Thank you. And Martha Ellen Davis is adding, thank you. The inclusion of popular genres, also oral expressions, right? Spoken word, dub poetry represent evolutions of traditional genres. Sound studies is another area, right? The intent in the name change is to be more inclusive, for sure. Thank you. And if I may, I think I see Saula's name, hand raised next. I hope I have your name pronounced correctly.
Sooi. Sooi. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your invitation on the meeting and this very interesting discussion. I think I support the new name, ICTM Council for Traditions of Music and Dance. It is very good. The former name is not absolutely. It may change depending on the conditions. Currently, dance occupies an important place in traditional and modern culture. I think maybe the change name, International Council of Traditional Music and Dance. International Council, not for traditions of music and dance. International Council for Traditional Music and Dance. Maybe.
Thank you for that suggestion. Yes. And indeed, it was one suggestion.
Because I know the traditional is very important in the name of our organization. But I know the dancing art is very popular in this time. And I think former name is not absolutely. We may change it. Depending on the conditions, modern conditions. Thank you very much.
You.
I support Katerina Foley.
Thank you very much for your support. And I'll say there, as I mentioned earlier, there was very strong support for entirely taking out the word traditions or traditional or anything to do with that. So I think, Catherine, you might want to speak to the fact that this was kind of a middle ground area. Is that about right?
Yes, it was, because we did look at notions of practices. We did look at notions of performing arts as well. And, having looked at these, it went back to trying to hold on to the history of the organization and not to change too much, because then it was almost as if we're going to become a different organization. And we were very cognizant of trying to hold on to, as I said at the very beginning of the presentation, what would change and what could not change within it. So we were confined to a certain extent to come up with what we thought was the best for the organization going forward, but at the same time having respect for where we've come from and trying to hold on to the past and go forward. And, if this name works, for 40 years, in 40 years' time, maybe there'll be another name change. I don't know. But at this point in time, looking at the data, having our discussions, this is the name we felt was best at this point in time.
Thank you, Catherine. Now, Egil has continued, and I'm going to ask if we can give Catherine a break. Maybe Dawn or Svanibor or even Carlos might be able to speak to the point he raises about hearing voices against adding dance, although it's my understanding that overwhelmingly there was votes for including dance. Svanibor, Dawn?
Oh, I activated my mic, sorry. Yes, I think in the previous General Assembly of members, I think it was very clear that there was an overwhelming support actually for the change towards the inclusion of dance. Egil? Egil has something to say, yes.
My point is only that it seems that these discussions have been going on without anybody present who has argued against the new name. And for fairness sake, I was arguing about traditional traditions, but in the same way, I have also then to include dance. So were there anybody arguing against the two elements of the new name in the process? That's my main thing. And it's too late now, but I think it's important to keep in mind simply because I think the process has been very thorough, but still.
Yes, I agree, Egil. Maybe Catherine would be then better to answer this question. But of course, if there is anybody else in this group who would like to argue in favor of other options, so please just feel free. This is a totally open discussion. Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Egil, for that question. And as I said to Ulrich, I have been a traditional musician and dancer all of my life. And, setting up an MA in ethnochoreology at the University of Limerick, also setting up an MA in Irish traditional dance performance at the University of Limerick, giving voice to the traditional performers. But it was within the ethnochoreology program that I realized that people coming to undertake ethnochoreological research were not just looking at traditional dance, and within the study group in ethnochoreology, it wasn't going to be my Irish traditional dancers who would be going there. It was going to be my ethnochoreology students who were not just looking at traditional dance. They were looking at different movement systems. And that was one of the reasons why I felt, these ethnochoreologists, they didn't belong to any organization if they didn't belong to the ICTM, organization. And that's what pushed me in that direction because, I will always love traditional dance. I fought for traditional dance, but the traditional dancers, predominantly they're performers. Yes, they are being reflexive, but they are performers. So it was for the ethnochoreologists that I felt their home was going to be within our organization, and hence traditions became the more inclusive term.
Thank you, Catherine. And I see that Silvia and then Nyla have raised their hands, but first I'd like to address the comment that came in from Tong Soon. Just a question about, what might be some possible interventions available to our members between now and July when the voting will take place in Ghana. I don't know, Svanibor, Don, if you might have some comments on that, Catherine. Certainly people, I think, would be welcome to write. I'm not sure to whom at this point.
I don't know about, I think, this is my own view. Svanibor, you can maybe comment on it, but after making the recommendation, it then fell into the hands of the executive board. But Svanibor, maybe you could talk to that.
Well, I would like to start where I stopped a little bit while answering Egil's question. So that the executive board reacted to what we recognized as the will of the membership expressed at the last General Assembly. So this is why we made a strategy actually to create this executive board committee, that was in charge of making all these communications and come with the best possible result. So now, what can be done? I think we presented our arguments in favor of change, and I believe so. Probably many members made up their minds whether to ask in favor or against the proposed change. So if there is any communication needed in the meantime, of course, we are going to be available at all times. As I suggested in this very short quote from our statutes, yes, the executive board is the body in the ICTM that governs the organization, but it is responsible to the membership. So we have really open ears, and we would like to hear any opinions. If anything else should be done, of course, we are here. But as far as I can see it now from my perspective, so the arguments were presented, and I think people would be in the position to make up their mind and just vote.
Thank you, Svanibor. And I think too, just thinking about the process for voting, it might be helpful just to recount again the process that has taken place over the last couple of years, perhaps in writing or something that can be shared again just before the vote to remind people of what the process was.
Absolutely.
Silvia,
this is why we have the listserv, and so yes, we will be in contact about it.
Silvia and Nyla, please.
Yes, we know that the discussion about tradition is a very huge and complicated discussion, but I would like to add some comments about, the meaning, the resonance of the word tradition and in other language and in other geopolitical regions. And in Latin America, especially in Spanish, Latin American Spanish and Latin American Portuguese or Brazilian Portuguese, sometimes the word traditional is very heavy, it's very complicated, and I know a lot of scholars that have a total, rechazo is. It's a kind of word that expels. How, Carlos?
Rejection, like a reaction, very negative reaction.
Yes, it's a very negative, very rejection, because in our region there are a lot of expression, musical and dance, that combine ethnical, indigenous, Afro-Latin American, traditional expression with new expression or popular expression. So there are no traditional expressions. we can say. So I think that this change from traditional to tradition could be a way of attract to our organization a lot of people that now is working with other social cultural realities, other, methodological approach. Is a very negative concept, traditional, in some countries, some regions, some theoretical frameworks that come from other history. So this is, a kind of, I say, geopolitical, probably, and pragmatical, a reason for trying this change. It is not an ideal term, tradition. I know that the term have problems too, but I think that have less problem than traditional. And for some people from other scholar fields, academies in other countries.
Thank you so much, Silvia, and certainly the Indigenous communities that I work with on the eastern coast of North America, northeastern coast. It's a true also. The comments about music and dance really not even necessarily being the terms of use. So Nyla, I'm thinking we need to take one last question. I don't see any other hands up either. So, but I know it's time to wrap up. Nyla, could we have a question or comment from you? And then I think I'll invite Sooi Beng to help us close.
Yeah. I just wanted to remind us that International Council for Traditional Music and Dance was one of the options proposed last time at the last General Assembly, and it did not receive the majority endorsement. Otherwise, we would be already that organization. This is basically a response to Ulrich and to Egil. then this session today is outcome of many years of debates in one or another way about the name change. And it is not only the issue of adding dance, it is also the problem of tradition or traditional. And the third thing, to be still specific in comparison to other scholarly organizations in music. And taking all these three major components, plus less important, but still the issue of acronym, this is really the best possible solution, which was elaborated, on the basis of all these very open debates, pro and contra, and then thanks to this committee and the whole board, which endorsed this as a proposal. I think now also to respond to Tong Soon's question, I think this is the proposal which is going to be presented for the membership to vote, either the present name or the new name, which is International Council for Traditions of Music and Dance. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Naila, and for summing up again, going over really quickly. Don, Sooi Beng has noted that the time is perhaps over, but I don't know if you had a very quick comment. Sooi Beng, is that okay if we?
Yeah, sure.
And thanks again, Naila, very much for explaining the process.
Yeah, thank you, Marcia. No, just Naila pretty much said what I wanted to say, but specifically in relation to Tong Soon's question about what possible interventions are available to members. Well, I would expand upon what Svanibor suggested and said, use the listserv. If you don't feel that this name is appropriate, tell everyone don't vote for it. It's quite simple. We've already put forward this name. No one is forcing this name upon anybody. This is a vote. It's a vote for this name or to retain the existing name. So I think that's the best possible intervention that can happen. If you feel extremely strongly, you can make your case on the listserv and attempt to convince people that that is the way to go. At least that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Sooi Beng.
Yes. We have to end. I'm so sorry, but the executive board of ICTM would like to thank all the speakers and all those who have taken time to participate in the dialogue session. Big thank you to the committee for the name of the council, especially Catherine, for all the hard work over the past 2 years to come up with alternatives and finally a new name. The speakers have given us insights into the background to the name change, recommendations for the new name, and explained the voting procedures. So with this information, we hope that all ICTM members will take this opportunity to vote at the General Assembly to be held at Ghana in July 2023. So see you in person or virtually in Ghana. And thank you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.